Welcome to Center Ground, your home for unfiltered discussion, where we tackle today's most talked about topics, break down current events, and give our take on the internet's latest foolishness. Tune in and let's find some common ground. Let's get this party started. Welcome back to Center Ground. Thanks for joining. But before I begin, I want to say my microphone might sound a bit different because I'm off site. I'm actually on vacation in Croatia, which is a beautiful country, formerly.
What is it, boy?
Formerly the Soviet Union. It was called Yugoslavia, but very beautiful country, beautiful beaches, nice weather, and the people here are just really, really nice. But I had a few moments to myself yesterday, and I went on YouTube, and I scrolled down my feed, and I saw something posted by PMP, Poor Man's Podcast. Y'all should check him out when you have time. He's a great content creator. But when I watched his video, I noticed a trend. And I'm starting to see patterns, so I wanted to talk about it just a little bit under the concept of, is it manipulation? Because I'm noticing something in regards to when public media begins to start speaking on certain topics. It's weird to me how they tend to focus on one side and not the other. But I'm going to let this play a little bit, and then I'll get into it.
We turn now to growing concerns around the proliferation of misogyny online and its migration into real-world interactions, especially those involving young men. John Yang has this story about a Detroit teenager's experience and the broader implications of this trend.
Before I let this continue, I do find it interesting that the commentator, the anchor, she's talking about, manosphere content and, the manosphere. And she mentioned specifically misogyny, which I find extremely not just damning, but also a bit deceitful, because what they do is, especially in public media, they tend to use imagery a lot to manipulate the public. And what I find fascinating is she's talking about how misogyny is the problem, but on the background of her, it says modern masculinity. So this is one of the ways that media tends to manipulate people. And what they do is when they want something viewed in a negative light, they'll talk bad about it and then put the actual definition of the word. So they're saying they're going to speak on modern masculinity, but you notice she didn't say anything about modern masculinity. Instead, she talked about misogyny. And what the untrained mind won't realize is when you do that, since we are creatures who pay very close attention to imagery, we'll tend to associate what we see on the screen, modern masculinity, with what she said, misogyny. So I'll let this rock out for a little bit.
Like many his age, Brian Campbell says he grew up an iPad kid, playing a lot of video games.
You about to lose anyway, it don't matter.
And when the COVID pandemic forced schools to shift to remote learning when he was 12, his primary connection with friends was online.
I would spend all my time on the internet. Either I'm playing the video game or on TikTok, or both. Fortnite, NBA 2K. If me and my friends
shout out to Fortnite,
get bored playing it for 10 hours, then we scroll on TikTok and send each other videos, and then we get back to playing the game.
Eventually, content with a specific perspective started showing up on Campbell's feeds.
It is so easy.
I want people to pause this for a second. I want people to take a moment and think about when this occurred, by the way. So it said he started when he was 12, and I'm going to assume it occurred during the pandemic, right? This is when most people were at home. Most people weren't doing anything. Most people were constantly in front of a screen. And I think that's important to note, because what most people didn't realize is when the world shut down, so to speak, and COVID hit, there was an overabundance of content creators and grifters that flooded the internet. People who had no ways of making money, who jumped on any trend, any opportunity to make a bunch of money online.
easy to become a top tier male in the world today because the competition is so ridiculously low.
Topics masqueraded as informational kind of male improvement. I think a lot of these people have lived more life. They're rich, they're nice car, all that. Like what society says is the ideal for a young man.
Not just society, just individuals. And we get that idea from a multitude of reasons. Men tend to be judged based on their productivity. Because you're judged based on your productivity, men are typically told to get to work. It's been the same way since the dawn of time. When we were hunters and gatherers, the man who was able to get the best, hunt the best, tend to have gotten, the ideal woman of the society. The guy who was able to, get to a leadership position at his job tends to get, the trophy wife. This is not just a societal thing. It's what people have the ability to witness, view, and see with their own very eyes. So even if society doesn't tell you something, you can then see the results of certain things and then act on it.
The message appealed to Campbell, and the more he engaged with it, the more he saw. Campbell had found himself in the heart of what's known as the manosphere. The term broadly refers to online communities that create and share content aimed at men and boys. But there's growing concern about the ideas behind that content. Misogynistic, often conspiratorial beliefs about gender roles and masculinity. And thanks to a handful of key influencers, the manosphere's reach has exploded. In an attempt to quantify that growth, researchers in Dublin set up accounts on multiple social media apps.
Before we get into that, I do find it hilarious that, they talk about the manosphere. And when I first came into contact with the manosphere, it wasn't really about misogyny or anything like that, but rather it was about male self-improvement. Hey, get off your butt, go to the gym, drink water, get healthy, make yourself a better candidate rather than complaining on the internet about your options. And you tend to find this earlier, before Kevin Samuels blew up, a lot of his content was aimed towards men. And it wasn't nice content either. It was usually him telling young men about themselves. I remember he was telling one young guy about choosing signals and how a guy felt like he didn't have to put in the work to get a girl's attention, which was dumb. I don't know who taught that boy that. But again, that was people like Kevin Samuels who pretty much stood as the father figure, which is why they call him the Godfather, for a lot of young men who grew up without their fathers, whether it be that their fathers were constantly at work or whether they grew up in a house with no father, right? Like I was one of those young men who grew up without a father. And as I grew up, of course, I had to find, male mentors and role models because no woman can actually turn a young man into a man. The most they can do, honestly, is make the man be their ideal man or their vision of a man. But no woman has really walked through the experience of men, so they don't really understand what it means to be a man. The same way we as young men don't understand pregnancy, right? A woman can tell you, I have 3 children. My wife can tell me all day, all night what she went through during her pregnancy. I have no idea. And I'll be honest, even as far as last night, we watched a movie about a woman who was pregnant, who wanted to be pregnant, and they was dropping a few gems here and there between the laughter and all the jokes. And I turned to my wife, I said, wow, you went through that? And she's like, yeah. And I mean, like, is that those type of things where you can learn and you can grow? You can have those conversations and you can learn, but considering that I have 3 children and I've never had a child come out of me, I'll never really know what it's like to give birth. The same way they'll never truly know what it means to be a man. It's really that simple.
Posing as teenage boys. Last year, they reported that in less than half an hour, every one of the accounts was fed manosphere content, whether they sought it out or not.
And here's an important distinction. That's more so on social media than manosphere content. If I create content online for a specific group and those people don't type or look up that content, but the social media platform that it's on just feeds it to them, you can't really blame the content creators, so to speak, right? And some of it, I'll be honest, some of the manosphere content that I've seen is clearly lies. It's clearly grifting. It's a bunch of guys getting on the internet saying the same things, selling hope, selling courses, selling dreams, right? My thing is when people start selling courses, honestly, that's sometimes you got to start, your antennas got to be up and you got to say, hey, maybe this is a scam.
In the post-Me Too movement, we've seen this surge of online misogyny in particular.
Cynthia Miller Idris is the founder of the Polarization and Extremism Research and Innovation Lab at American.
I'm trying to not stop this every 5 seconds, but it is interesting to me that whenever you have these conversations, it's always a woman. And it's usually a white woman that is the leader or who is the head of whatever article or research project that's involved in this thing. Kind of reminds me of the leaders of the feminist movement themselves, right? But it tends to be a very specific looking person who comes out on top, who makes all this money, who writes books, who does all these things. And again, you have to remember all of this stuff in my mind goes back to grifting, people who do things for the single sake of making money. I don't think this woman is trying to help little boys. I think she's trying to promote herself, and she's using the current, talking point, aka manosphere content.
American University. Her book, Man Up, The New Misogyny and the Rise of Violent Extremism, will be published in the fall.
They land on an influencer who's offering them often very tangible and real help that makes a difference, right? Like get 8 hours of sleep and drink water and get to the gym. And they package that with scapegoating of women or treatment of women or an idea of success as being dominant. And so, your life is improving while you're starting to believe this other stuff.
Women sell purity, men sell success.
This is seen as a more dominant position.
A woman wants more than the guy does.
The average woman will always cheat more than the average man.
That's the sort of content Campbell was seeing. Soon, he was echoing those ideas.
How women want to control us, and us as young men, we have to not be at the whim of women and stuff I didn't really know what I was talking about. But
like I said earlier, how you have women like the woman in the video, the doctor, who immediately paints manosphere content in a negative light simply because she doesn't like it. She already agreed that some of it is beneficial to young men because it helps them grow and it helps them learn and do all these other things. However, she flipped it on its head and said a lot of it is misogynistic in nature because it teaches them to do blah, blah, blah. And you can fill in that blank however you want, but that blank is typically and simply put just what she herself or women in general don't like hearing. Is it true? They never speak to that, but they'll say that it's bad and they don't like it.
It sounded good.
Campbell's dad, Al, and his older brother, Brandon, who had fallen down similar rabbit holes when he was younger, noticed a change.
He started mentioning a lot of things typical of someone who believes that the world is against them, where you think that if you are not, I'll say in quotes, superior, then something's wrong. He was kind of taking on opinions that didn't sound like his own. They were opinions that I myself once had because I had gained them from someone else.
While Brian was seeing...
I find that very interesting that his brother said that, because I'm curious. I wonder if off camera, and sometimes you got to be very careful because he could have a corporate job he doesn't want to lose. He could want to be a politician in the future, or maybe they'll just dancing for the cameras, right? But I'm curious to find out if the sons or if the father doesn't understand the need to feel quote unquote superior. And when I say superior, I'm saying within society, and anyone can get in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong. In society, we view people as levels up, right? One level is over another, right? You know that in your life, when you walk past a homeless person who has nothing, you are in some way, shape, or form superior to them. People may not like the connotation of the word, since the word superior tends to have a negative connotation, but I find it amazing that when you go to the corporate office and you say that someone is your superior, if it's your manager, if it's your senior leader, no one bats an eye. If you say that the CEO is your superior, again, no one bats an eye. I'll even flip it a little bit, because this is kind of like a man versus woman topic. When you look at manosphere content, and you view the word superior, it's bad when men tell other men that they need to be more superior. However, when you look at it from a job perspective, let a woman have a better job than you and make more money than you. You think she won't treat you as if you're an inferior? Right? Women get on the internet every single day and talk bad about men who make less than them, who don't have money. Hell, they say crazy things like, if you don't make a certain amount of money, you shouldn't date. You shouldn't have a family. You shouldn't even be looking for love. You should just work harder to make what I want you to make. But again, this is what I'm talking about, where we'll have these conversations. They'll be completely one-sided. It'll only be about the manosphere side of things and how negative it is. They'll never speak on the positive outcomes of manosphere content, how many people it made better, how many people it made stronger, how many people it told to go to the gym and they turned their lives around, how many people they actually learned how to man up, become more of a man by listening to other men who had success and it benefited their lives. They'll never talk about that. Ironically enough, they'll also never talk about toxic femininity, right? That's not a phrase you've ever heard in global media. You've heard it on social media, perhaps, but you've never heard it on, pop culture references. You never heard it on any news channel because they don't talk about it. At the end of the day, men don't typically watch the news. Women watch the news. Men don't consume this content. Women consume this content. So that's why I'm questioning whether or not it's manipulation, because they don't talk about the other side. They only talk about the men. The men are always in a negative light and they know women eat it up. So they're going to continue selling that product. And this is why earlier I said that woman is doing it as a grift to make more money for herself. I think I'm going to make another video on the concept of grifting itself and why people do it. But again, let's continue.
Seeing this material, were you aware of it?
I guess I didn't really pick up on it at first. But over time, you say a few things, it gets a little concerning, like, hey, my wife's going to clean up after me. Being the alpha male and the this and the that and the type of guy that's the strongest, the baddest, and everybody needs to bow down and respect you, but then you don't have to respect anybody else.
When it comes to behavior,
see, and I don't think that's manosphere content. I think that's clown behavior. Those who think they're better, stronger, faster than everybody. I remember my mother used to tell me a bullet has no name, meaning that there's always going to be somebody better than you. It's always going to be someone who can end you at a moment's notice. It doesn't matter how strong and powerful you are, right? And I learned that from a woman. That was my mother that taught me that, right? So if you have content creators that's telling you that you need to have people bow down to you and you don't have to do things like clean up after yourself, you're listening to a loser. And it's usually a loser who's trying to feed something within you so that you can give them money. I guarantee you every content creator that speaks that way doesn't actually care about the young men they're talking to, but rather they're trying to reach into those young men's pockets. I guarantee you those men are selling courses, selling books, or selling some other nonsense to make money off of you.
Behavior like this, there's really no excuse for it, but there may be an explanation for it.
Psychologist and author Lisa Damour specializes in adolescent development.
It's helpful to think about 12-year-old boys in broader context. Girls hit puberty before boys do. So what this means is that for 7th grade boys in general, the girls are often beating them at recess, and then they come into the classroom and the girls are often beating them in school. So if you are a 12 or 13-year-old,
here's the funny thing. So I agree that young girls are beating young boys in school, whatever that means. I think young women and women in general tend to have better memory. So I don't know if most people understand this, but schools are designed for young girls, right? School was designed for girls. You sit still, you sit in a classroom, you listen, yay, nay, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, blah, blah, blah. And most of schooling, modern day United States schooling, is rote memorization, meaning you use your memory to answer questions. And because you use your memory to answer questions, that's how you move ahead. Personally, when I was growing up, my memory sucked. So I struggled in class and I struggled on tests because I had anxiety, performance anxiety, often when I was taking tests. However, As I've gotten older and I was able to think critically and figure things out, I tend to started doing better than my counterparts who have better memory than me, because they might remember the formula on how to do something when I actually had the experience of how to actually fix a problem because I already started doing it, right? I couldn't rely on my memory, so I relied on figuring things out. And now in my day job, I am literally a professional troubleshooter. I get paid to fix problems because I have the ability to fix a problem. And then I work with a ton of people who have great memory, but can't actually do anything sometimes. They can't figure things out. Why? Because they lack the actual experience of doing the work, right? So I agree that, yeah, in certain instances, young women, especially using their memory, do better than the young men. I'm just going to be honest. I've never seen a 7th grade girl beat 7th grade boys in sports or anything else like that. I've never seen that in my life. 4th grade, maybe. 7th grade, that's when young boys start hitting puberty and gaining muscles. That's actually when young boys start outlapping young girls easily. But that's another topic.
Boy, and you have had a very rough day at school where a girl outran you at recess and then had...
That's my point. That doesn't happen.
All the right answers when you didn't understand what was happening in class. And you come home feeling pretty small and you hop online.
And that's another thing. How would she know that young boys can't answer questions? And that's another problem that we have in modern day schooling. I noticed, I can't remember the country, and I'll have to look this up later, but there are some countries that tend to segregate young boys and young girls in classrooms. And that's because they understand firmly that young boys learn completely different from young girls. So if we go back in time to hunter-gathering stage, when young girls used to learn how to tend to the village and everything else, young boys were taken out of the village to do something more physical like hunt. And I think the reasoning for that is, if you look at young boys and you look at young girls, they behave completely different. If you leave them, I think it was Jordan Peterson who spoke to this. He said, if you leave them in unstructured play, young boys tend to build hierarchies. They know who's the best at what, and they kind of go off of that. They understand that there will be someone who is superior, like they said, while there are some who are inferior. It doesn't mean that you're incompetent. It doesn't mean that you're incapable. It just means that there's a Kobe Bryant, there's a Michael Jordan, there's a LeBron James, there's a Kevin Durant, Steph Curry. And then they have Rodney Turioff. They have Luke Walton. You know what I mean? They have people who may not be as great as the greatest player on the team, but they still have a role. While girls tend to play, unstructured play, they tend to do things where they're all equal. They call it utilitarian, right? Everything is equal. And I think that's why, as women are gaining in society, you hear more and more about people trying to make everything equal for people. And I find it ironic that I'm currently in a country that tried to make things equal for people and it fell apart, right? So I do believe that we should treat each other as equals, but we can't pretend that everyone's equal in everything, because it just doesn't work.
And there is somebody telling you, listen, guys are actually great, and the thing that's holding us back are girls. That is pretty compelling.
Jamie, I want you to listen carefully.
Online radicalization and the manosphere are at the center of the Emmy-nominated Netflix miniseries Adolescence.
Hated this show, by the way, and what I find amazing is they'll never make a female version. But keep going.
Platform's most watched show in the first half of the year, with 145 million views. It's a fictional account of how these influences lead a teenage boy to murder a female classmate.
It's a call to action by the manosphere. 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. You must trick them, because you'll never get them in a normal way.
In real life, there's a growing number of examples of manosphere culture affecting interactions between boys and girls.
It's like little things like, oh, you should be back in the kitchen. And even though it's a joke, some people take it really far.
There are games that I've stopped playing because every single time I joined, I'd receive a rape threat.
Me and my former roommate were chased on campus by 2 different men.
I don't know about that, but I'm going to go back to the first 2. And they were talking about game room chats. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. If you are a young girl with a weak stomach, you should never play in a live party chat in any game, like Fortnite or Call of Duty. Those are some of the most foul chats I've ever seen growing up. And it had nothing to do with manosphere content. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as a manosphere. YouTube barely was a thing. And they still spoke crazy in those chats. These kids will say the wildest things in the world. I remember I was on Fortnite and I heard a little 6-year-old calling me the N-word. I'm like, how he even know I was black, right? But that just tells me he probably called everybody the N-word, which also tells me his parents are either accepting of this behavior or nowhere to be found. Either way is terrible. But my point is, you got kids that young who naturally just say the wildest things because they know that they're protected. It has nothing to do with gender. Believe me when I tell you. It's just that people get online, they feel safe, and they just say whatever. Right? I had to tell that little boy, keep playing, I'm gonna become your daddy. That's the only way I got him to stop. Because he actually believed like, uh-oh, this guy's about to come, this N-word's about to become my daddy if I keep playing.
And saying that they were going to have a lot of fun with us that night.
Those kinds of things are have migrated from, online worlds into real life. Sometimes in ways that boys are just trying to be provocative. Sometimes in ways that are really dangerous stepping stones on the way to more harmful and violent content and behaviors.
Experts say the key to combating the spread of these ideas and preventing their worst effects is to engage with young men.
Don't start with a lecture. Start instead with a question. Ask, have you seen this? What is it like to see it? What do you think adults...
No. Here's how you start this thing. You get men to raise men. It's that simple. You get real men, strong men, men who actually have been productive, men who have actually accomplished things, not feminine men, but men, manly men that they can look up to. I remember growing up, I had one teacher. I feel like I've only had one real male teacher outside of like music and gym. Like most of my schooling, I remember in 6th grade, I had one male teacher named Mr. Thomas. And I remember the boys, we were in school in the hood, right? And he was like a burly, he looked like the brawny guy, but just a black guy, right? Actually, he looked like Mr. Clean, but he was black. And when I tell you, he would tell us to be quiet, the whole room will go silent. But I also noticed, and then growing up, you kind of remember some of the lessons he taught completely different from the female teachers. The female teachers tend to have ruled with emotion. They would yell at you. They would scream at you. They would threaten you. They would do all of these things that mothers typically do to their children, which is why it typically does not work for young boys. And instead of understanding that and, putting forth a campaign to getting more male teachers, what they do is they just condemn male students. Male student can't sit still, even though we know boys can't sit still. They're bad. They need to be on Ritalin. They need to be on some sort of drug. But the young girls who can do it are better than the young boys. That's even the thing that this lady herself said, right? But what I've learned is when I had teachers like Mr. Thomas, if he did raise his voice, whole room went silent, just like as a father finally raised his voice. And that's another thing. This man didn't raise his voice consistently. He raised his voice when we were getting way too out of hand. Most of the time, he just spoke and we listened simply because he was a manly man. He was a father figure for a lot of us in the classroom because most of us grew up without a father. We were grown. We were raised by women who didn't lay down that structure, that discipline. What they did was when they got upset, they would beat us. When they got upset, they would yell at us. When they got upset, they would threaten us, just like the teachers. And it's no wonder. And I feel like everybody, and I believe that everybody who had a strong male teachers, I'm not talking about those soft teachers that's scared of the students. I'm talking about like an actual man in the classroom. You learn rather fast that there's a difference in the whole classroom dynamic when there's a male teacher versus a female teacher. I'm not saying that we don't need female teachers because Lord knows they have been holding it down for generations. What I'm saying is there needs to be a campaign to add more male influence in teachers in the classroom. And I'm not talking about the gay ones, not to ostracize gay men, but what I'm saying is gay men tend to act just like straight women. And it's something about having a stoic, strong male figure around that helps. It helps structure things. It helps keep things in order. Even myself, I have 3 daughters. And sometimes when they're acting up, I say nothing. I let my wife handle it. And then when they don't listen to her, that's when I step in. I have a baby who just turned 2 years old, right? Sometimes she does the same things her older sister does. Mommy talks, they don't listen. They think it's fun and games. But when daddy talks, it gets real quiet. And I think if we had that balance in classroom, and I guess this is where we can find that center ground. If we had that balance in classrooms, I think, and actually had these discussions with young boys, with manly men, I don't think they would turn to the internet for advice. Well, maybe I'm just dumb.
Adults don't know about this that we should probably know. And how can I be helpful?
That's what happened to Brian Campbell in Detroit. Around Thanksgiving 2020, his older brother, home from college, sat him down for a long conversation.
So I wanted him to have a more, I guess, reflective.
Look at that. That's exactly what I was talking about. Now, here's where it's concerning to me. He's growing up in a house with a father. So if his father isn't the one that's helping him and teaching him, that tells me that the father is either constantly away, constantly busy, constantly ignoring, constantly neglecting, or is just at work, which can, you can be all of those things if you're at work all the time, right? I know people who have fathers in their home and it means absolutely nothing because the father's not around, right? So that concerns me a bit, but perhaps his brother is the manly man who can step in front of him and tell him, here's how you should do things. Here's how you shouldn't do things, right? I don't have a son, but if I did, I would tell my son, and he would see it in real time. It's all right for you to cook. It's all right for you to clean. I actually enjoy cooking for my family. I cooked for them this morning, cooked breakfast for them, right? It's all right for you to go out for lunch and pay for the lunch. I just did that, right? But it's also all right for you to have balance within your household. My wife will probably, cook dinner. My wife is the one who washed the kids up after we came from the beach, right? It's okay that you have balance in your household. And I think that's really what we're lacking in the modern age. Everyone's jockeying for power. Women think they can tell young men what to do. Young men think they could tell young women what to do. No one's happy. No one's having babies. The birth rate continues to drop, which is horrible for society. But people still aren't paying attention to that because everyone is still making money. That's why as a country, the United States is having severe issues. I don't know if anyone else is noticing this. Mental illness is on the rise. Teenage pregnancy is on the rise. Single motherhood is on the rise. People going to jail. Well, I don't know. They said the jail rate is dropping, but that just might be because people aren't going to jail or staying in jail anymore because jails are pretty much full, right? I guess they made that money off all the jailed people and they can't fit anybody else in. But my point is this, right? As a society, we truly have to stop looking across the aisle and pointing a finger at what the others are doing wrong. Men do it to women. Women damn sure do it to men, and they do it consistently and in media, so they get assistance, which is why I tend to lean on the male side, because right now the males are the underdog in this conversation. Don't believe me? Find me a public syndicated programming or channel like PBS doing the same thing for the women. Women have rappers that tell them to rob men. You don't get this type of content from these channels. You have women online who are telling other women, young girls, to use men, leave them, and go sleep with whoever you want, to be liberated. I don't know how that's liberation, but that's what they're saying, right? And we don't have the opposite end of this spectrum. I would be less upset at this type of content if I seen a female version anywhere. But of course, that's not what we see. They pander to the women. They tell the women that they're perfect and they don't need to change anything, which is why majority of my community anyway is morbidly obese or obese, right? Because they're told that they don't need to change anything. And if anyone tries to get you to change, try to make you do anything that you don't want to do, it's something wrong with them. Even if it means getting healthier, they're like, nope, something wrong with you, right? But again, I'm kind of bleeding into other conversations. But my point is this. we need to find center ground on topics like this, or it's not going to end very well. You have young men fighting young women. You have young women fighting young men. You have older women now seeking young men and using them, abusing them, and then they are ruining them for the women that of their age. You got men doing the same thing as young women. The argument is always, well, the men get to do it. It's like, I don't understand why so many women love to copy what the worst men are doing. They don't copy what the good men are doing. They don't copy what the good fathers are doing. They don't even like the good fathers until they need them. But again, bleeding into another conversation. Until I start seeing this type of content go the opposite direction, I don't want to hear it, right? I and a bunch of other men and a bunch of other young men don't want to hear it, because it's nothing more than manipulation. If you can't look at what women are doing to young men and seeing that there's a problem there, but you can always point to the young men and see that what they're doing is definitely a problem, something tells me not only is that bias, but you're also, ignorant to an entire gender, their struggles. And for the most part, it goes back to the whole concept of a lot of women don't actually care about men, particularly if men aren't doing something that benefits them. So I'm going to say, when you continue seeing these videos, when you continue seeing other news channels, because I know there's another one, I've seen it recently, I just can't remember who did it, have another manosphere bashing kind of campaign. When you see Netflix come out with a whole show, a whole series about a young boy watching manosphere content and how bad it is, but you'll never, and I mean never, see the inverse. You'll never see the opposite, where there's a young girl watching and listening to horrible media and then treating young men like crap, right? You'll never see that in media. So until you start seeing that, I'm going to say, young men, be careful what you consume. Both men and women will try to manipulate you to get what they want out of you. Use your common sense. Learn, grow. Take what they're saying and analyze it. Don't just listen to what strangers say and then run with it. Even what I'm saying, I'm a stranger. Look at what I'm saying, do your own research, look it up, see if what I'm saying is true, and then apply it. That's what men teach. This is what fathers teach. Don't try to be the greatest man in the world. Don't think anyone owes you anything. If you get a woman, treat that woman right. Because I have daughters, and at the end of the day, fathers like me will be your worst nightmare. Let's just be real, because we don't play that. And then again, our daughters who come from households with active fathers don't act like the majority of the women in the world. So stop thinking that all women are bad. All women are not bad. All women do not cheat. Probably the ones you want do. And that would just mean that you're just like the single mothers that your favorite content creator likes to criticize. Simply put, hopefully there will be more, midlife advice type lessons that I throw in here. Hopefully y'all listen. If you don't, then you're on your own. If you do, I pray that it helps and it benefits you. I don't really feel like watching the rest of this video. I think it's all nonsense, but do whatever you wish. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to watch it. I pray that this helps somebody, really and truly. Until we meet again. Thanks for listening to the Center Ground Podcast. We'll be back soon with some more great content. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on the video. We are a new channel, and growth is essentially our main objective. So send us an email at centerground.pod@gmail.com with any ideas or clips you would like for us to review. This was definitely fun, and I'd say let's do it again. But before you go, always remember, greatness lives somewhere within you. Just make sure you're taking the time to find the key to unlock that greatness. Until we meet again, I'll see you soon.